Okay, this is one of my favorites.
Both of my arms to block the punch. Again, this side. Immediately after that, before his second hand goes to hit me, I hit him with the back fist in the neck or the ear or the jaw. Once I hit him, again, immediately get around the neck.
Get around the neck.
And trap him down this way, as if you're going to choke him out, but we don't want to choke him out. Instead, we use our body weight, sandwich him down, and lock my hands together like this. One behind the leg, one over top of his neck. You guys see how my lock is? Check out this lock. A monkey hook right here.
Monkey hook.
Hooking it right there. And then I'm going to make his lips kiss his knee.
Make his lips
okay,
kiss
and once
his
he
knee.
does that, I'm going to roll him back, keep this lock
his own
tight,
ass.
and roll him over.
Roll him and roll on top.
On top, so that I stay in the superior position. Now, if we were in jiu-jitsu or in the UFC, or we were competing, I might want to keep going to win the match. But on the street, I don't want to get stuck down there. So as soon as I'm on top and I'm safe, I leave him there and I take off.
Take off.
Again on this side, a little bit smooth.
Okay, time to roast this guy. So, he acknowledges that we're on the street, not in an MMA match or on the mats, jiu-jitsu match or in a UFC or MMA match. And yet, he's on the street and he's rolling onto his own back for no reason, concrete, mind you, over his own neck, his own head, with a heavy weight. So let's dissect this.
Both of my arms.
Strike is coming in. A shitty hook strike coming at a reach distance. So this person is not stepping in, they're not charging. There's no power, no aggression behind this technique. Now what I will say about this strike compared to the one we saw in the first one, his left elbow is in better alignment relative to the strike. Not much better, it's still elevated, but at least he's now turned farther, right? And this actually makes this an acceptable block in relationship to his opponent. Now, what's he doing wrong? And this is a big one. This is a big one. You, on the one hand, you never cross your center line unless you can avoid it. There are exceptions, but very few, and for self-defense, almost none. He's crossing his center line with the right hand to add reinforcement to the block. Second principle, don't use two tools when one will suffice. So his opponent threw one punch. Jake has eliminated two arms in defense for it. They're not grappling, they're not controlling, they are just stuffing it. Now, if his opponent was 250 pounds and this one punch could crush a wall, it might make sense to reinforce the strike. But guys, basic blocking I have done these outside blocks, just shooting these blocks into the elbow with guys that are 250 pounds of muscle. They don't get through. I mean, you need to learn to block properly, and this type of an approach, committing two hands to one, it's bad. It's bad play. So now he does that. He shoots in the back fist, right into the neck. Let's see what he does there, actually.
Same move, again on this side, a little bit smoother. The punch comes in, block it, hit to the head.
A little smoother. So he says hit to the head. He doesn't hit to the head. He hits to the neck, the back of the wrist. The targeting is way off.
Over the top.
Slides that arm around the top.
And get his head deep in my armpit. This is not going to cut it. This is what I want.
Ooh.
I want him to feel like a football player hitting him with that tackle. Sandwich him down.
Now, Jake. So, if you are able, I made this point on the first technique, if you are able to spot a technique and able to block it with two hands, if you're that good at that range. Now, this might be a reaction, right? You might get blindsided and just cover, and this happens in self-defense, and that's okay. If you're not getting hit or hurt in that moment, you can still play the game, right? He's standing. He's squared off with his opponent in a street fight. This is street self-defense, right? Committing two hands to one. Now, if you are good enough to catch that hand, strike simultaneously, just like we talked about in the first technique, right? So he's hitting twice. Notice my center line is fully exposed, right? The guy has another arm. Okay. The only time that I would ever want to cross my center line like this is if I had distance and was spinning for a kick of some kind, maybe possibly an elbow, or if I was to the outside of my opponent's arm. There is justification to be able to cross your center line if you are on the outside, but again, he's exposed. He's on the inside of his opponent's guard. He's blocking across his center line. His opponent has one technique left. Well, or many. He's got certainly one arm left that's chambered. So in this time, Jake has blocked with both arms. What's happening in this split moment between these two strikes? He's blocking and hitting. You may be quick enough, but his opponent's going to be moving forward. He's going to be charging him down, most likely, or striking in quick combinations. So this assumption is just, it's insane. So now, let's say that you're doing the back fist. Let's say you're doing another maybe related technique like the knife hand. Other options, rather than committing both hands across your center line, are coming forward to the neck, right? Rather than giving it so much attention, attack the person's center line in return, or attack to the side of the neck, the carotid artery. You know, if he's back fisting, the neck is always a superior target than the head. But if he's doing back fisting, you go to the temple, maybe the nose, maybe the philtrum. You've got a few good targets. Otherwise, both at the same time. Now look at the elbow, right? I'm not in here striking with a knife hand or a back fist. My center line is covered, my elbow is on the outside of my body, and I'm cutting the center line and getting two techniques at one. This would be a reasonable way to throw the technique that he's talking about, and it's same time blocking, which would be much more effective. Now the second thing he does, the reach that he does around this guy's neck is entirely lacking in control, not just aesthetics, but entirely. I don't know if he was just trying to be nice and kind of show the technique with this person, or if he believes that that's how you should grapple. I mean, we're moving into the grappling range here. But look, one of the best applications of this, two of them, probably come from Thai boxing and Filipino boxing. And generally speaking, when you start to manipulate and go for a head wrap or even a neck or head manipulation, you apply weight and pressure to off balance that opponent. This guy, there's no reason for him to be significantly off balance at this point. He's had a slight stun. At that range, the back fist, maybe it will stun him, but it's probably not going to take the guy out of the game. So, and if it did, there'd be no need for these follow-ups. But if you strike in and strike with one or the knife hand, there's no reason to retract that hand. Strike through, apply weight and pressure, offset that person so that you get this, right? If the strike is coming in here to the head or to the neck, you get this happening, and either the back foot's going to compensate by crossing the line or they're going to recover with the front. But either way, that weight is going to be off balanced. And from there, all you need to do is continue to wrap that into that guillotine posture. So you don't reach around. You need to control the body, control the head, control the neck throughout that process. There's no control in this, meaning his opponent at any time could just stand up, could just stand back, could just rotate, and he would shake off the technique, right? Now, the craziest part of this sequence, the one that probably rubs me the worst. A guillotine is a strong technique. This is a submission technique. It ends a lot of grappling matches. If you've ever seen any, mixed martial arts match, it's one of the go-to top, probably 2 or 3 go-to submissions. It's highly effective. It's highly powerful. It's incredibly difficult to defend. And if you can get it on your feet, this is not an easy technique to shake off. So what does he do? He's in a position where he has potentially a standing guillotine, right? He stunned the opponent, wraps the head. If you can sink that forearm up underneath and drop your hips in a little bit to get that tilt, get his body lifting and the head pulled down, that's a choke that could, if not seriously injure the person, put them unconscious in less than 10 seconds. And if you drop down into a full kind of guard and do a guillotine from the ground, the fight is going to be done with most untrained people very, very quickly. So why, I ask, would you give up a position like that, whether to finish the submission on your feet or even to go onto your back, to go onto this monkey hook and roll the opponent over, which is not a fatal attack. It's not a submission. There are no destructions involved. And it leaves his opponent in an identical position of whatever he was in after he got struck to the head, only now he's on the ground and on his back. He can still fight, right? So this idea that I'm just going to roll him over and go through this risky ground technique where I'm rolling backwards onto my own head, my own neck. I don't know what's on the ground. Is there broken glass? Is there a curb? I mean, you know, this is concrete, people. This is not a smart thing to do. I mean, look, if you're going to take somebody to the ground, they hit the ground first. It's not an ideal thing to go to your own back. This is, in judo, in jiu-jitsu, this would be called a sacrifice throw or a sacrifice technique. Why? You're taking the risk to potentially sacrifice yourself to get this thing done. Why? You had a guillotine. So you're abandoning a potentially, you know, fight-winning technique for something that is non-submissive, non-fatal. And when I say that, I don't mean that we should be aiming to kill anybody, or, you know, and when I talk about and teach self-defense, it's very much so, look out for yourself. Last resort would you go to those levels. But if you're in a position, a choke is one of the most humane ways to put somebody out. If you know how to choke, and he maybe doesn't know how to do that, it's the most humane way to deal with somebody when you're really under attack, because you can submit that person, they can lose consciousness either through a blood choke or an oxygen choke. And within a very short period of time, they're going to lose consciousness. Doesn't mean they die, and you can revive them relatively quickly and they'll be able to come to. He's got to keep fighting. He's assuming he's going to be able to run after this, and why? I mean, there's nothing that's happened in this engagement that's going to help him win the street fight. So look, the combination is fun. It doesn't look too bad, but it doesn't teach you anything about strategy. Somebody would have to comply 100% with this weird kind of set of attack defense scenarios, and you have to keep in mind every time that you make a movement, your opponent readjusts. They're thinking, they're alive, they're moving, and so if you are not controlling that person, and there are several points here where that could have been changed, right? 2 blocks when there could have been a block and a strike. That strike didn't need to be retracted for a reach. That could have applied pressure. You could have stuck to that opponent's neck or head and manipulated that down into a hook. And from there, you've got your submission, whether you want to do it on your feet or whether you want to fall back for more control on the ground. But no, we surrender for the monkey hook. And we run. Running is good. Look, I'm with him on the running, but not the monkey hook. Let's look at number 5.
Final technique here today, I'm not going to wait until he attacks me. I could tell I couldn't escape, the fight is imminent. I'm going to go for that knee trap right there just to soften him up. A little bit of a knee trap.
Attack is
find
imminent.
This all the time in crane style kung fu. It's very common, and in tiger style. The knee trap can be high, it can be low to the shin, or it can be right up onto the hip. Any location is fine. The goal is to hit him hard enough so he remembers us, but it's also a setup for the real move, which is going to be knee trap, raise up, his hands come up, and then flying scissor, take him down with the legs. We call it a scissor sweep. It's also called a scissor kick takedown. So one more time, as we're engaged in combat, go for the knee trap, soften him up. Raise the hands up, make him think I'm going for the head, which opens up his entire body. Get in there, one leg across the top of that hook kick. I'm always courteous and I hold the head for you, the people that I like.
So nice.
The other leg goes behind both knees and then traps him down to the ground. Now immediately I'm going to try to push away and get out of there and free myself.
Okay, so this comes back, I mean, another, attractive kind of setup here. And look, I get flack for some of the stuff that I put out in terms of demos, but to be clear, some of the stuff that I put out in the past, some of my sash demonstrations, some of the locking and controlling and some of these things, I'm either teaching a specific tool or technique, not claiming that is the application in self-defense, or I'm doing something more, choreographed and aesthetic. I particularly like to work on those projects because it keeps my mind and my body sharp. I rarely, if ever, put out specific instruction on self-defense because I think it's a pretty serious thing to be looking at. And so we got to take this seriously. This is not, if this was just a tutorial on a scissor takedown, his application is great. Jake looks great doing it. He's doing it the right way. This is a flying or an aerial scissor takedown. There are a few ways to do it. You've got the capoeira style, which actually drops to the ground and extends the back leg before it scissors. So the application is right on. There are a few varieties and ways of doing this, but more or less correct. Now, if we talk about this as a self-defense technique, there are a couple issues. Scissor takedowns are not readily learned by most people. If you're a natural athlete, maybe you can manage it. If you are a skilled, trained martial artist, maybe you can manage it. Most people are not going to make this look good, which means you are not going to make this look good. It's you might be able to pull it off in sparring, but to pull it off under pressure against a live opponent that is actually trying to do you harm in a serious way, when your adrenaline is pumping, you've got tunnel vision, you're a little bit scared, when all this stuff is going on, aerials should not be the go-to technique, right? So the foot stomp that he does at the beginning, this is maybe the way that he's applying it here is the way that you would expect to see it in a cage fight or in a dojo. It's not the way that you should implement such things on the street. That's a sparring technique, the way that he's implemented it, which means it's very controlled. He snaps the kick, the distance is relatively close, but he's fundamentally not doing real destruction with that kick. So if you're striking to a point of the body like this, he claims, well, it'll make him remember you. Look, on the street, this is not where you're going to fight these guys, 9, 10 more times. This is your one shot. Whether or not they remember you is totally irrelevant. You need to win. I mean, that's the game. Winning defined by, surviving unscathed and making sure that you remain whole in the process. And in general, these tend to be pretty traumatic experiences, right? So if this is a serious assault or you really have to defend yourself, you don't fuck around with this a small knee stuff. If you were to do such a thing, you need to be moving forward. And Bruce Lee taught this in combination with a few trapping techniques, for example, where he would come in with a low shin or a low knee strike, and what that would do, which he's correct about, which is stall the opponent and would give you an opportunity to enter. But to stall the opponent and then to reset, I'm not sure I understand the value of this particular combination. And he's left a good amount of time where his opponent could have readjusted, done any number of things in the meantime, charged, sidestepped, maneuvered. Now he's using the same technique in terms of the hands raising to enter for the scissor kick. This can be effective and it can work. And it's one of the applications that I've used and taught back in the day, just similar to the back kick. I think that Jake does actually understand kicking application pretty well. Now after he's got the guy down, scissor takedowns are one of the most gentle forms of takedowns and sweeps that exist. There are other ways of doing them that are much more devastating when you actually do it to the other side of the body and scissor the back, meaning you're pushing what would that be? You're pushing the chest back and the pelvis forward, and when you scissor the body this way to the lower back, you can actually break somebody's back. And that is not just game ending, but not just fight ending, but game ending for that person probably forever. I mean, that's a serious type of attack. This type of attack where you sweep in the knees and the stomach, it's really hard to do damage with this. I mean, you can even have a strong scissor technique, but it's going to sit somebody down comfortably. And again, you are going to the ground, you're going to your own back on the concrete. And what's there? We just, we don't know what kind of surface we're playing on, what kind of junk is in the streets, might roll in somebody's gum. But yeah, so let's say you take them down with a scissor. Hypothetically, you land a scissor technique and somebody's assaulting you and you take them down with a scissor technique. You're wrapped up in that person's body and they are in you. You've got your legs on the stomach and behind the knees. Your positioning is not much better than theirs. And what would generally be a follow-up to a takedown like this, if you knew what you were doing, there's only one, which is going to be a foot lock or a leg lock. It's the only way to follow this technique up in a way that actually submits or controls an opponent. Otherwise, they're going to do it to you. Your top foot, in this case his right foot, was on his opponent's chest for a second. All that guy had to do is wrap it. So I do want to say this. Jake is making a lot of these techniques look pretty good. There are fatal flaws within a lot of them, not in terms of, look, technique doesn't always mean something without looking at context, without looking at angles, relationship to the opponent, size relationship with the opponent, distancing. There's so much that goes into an effective technique. What he's delivering are actually well-structured techniques for the most part. It's just that in live, aggressive situations, they take way too much for granted. And if I could leave you guys with anything, it's this. Yes, learn your techniques, drill the shit out of them, do your practice, but strategy, strategy, strategy. Do not ever make assumptions about how somebody will attack you. Do you need to simulate attacks to train? 100%. Like, that should be the baseline of your experience and a baseline of your practice. Do your thousands, tens of thousands of drills, looking at all kinds of scenarios, doing them and doing them and doing them. But this is a real lack of somebody with full contact competitive experience, or real street experience. This is not how street fights go. And when you see a street fight, this might be a high school street fight with 30 kids standing around cheering for their guy to win, and both guys are pacing it because they've watched UFC and MMA. This is not how it's going to look when you are actually surprised and somebody attacks you on the street and actually wants to do you harm. It's not going to be like this. Or in a bar, right? Maybe some guy thinks you were flirting with his girlfriend. Attacks come very quick. They come when you're probably not fully aware of them. And your ability to set up and have this kind of time and tempo and cadence between your interaction and distancing is not real. It's not real at all. And so while some of the components are accurate, right, you might be able to throw this kind of a kick, you might be able to do that kind of a strike or block, you really need to look at the circumstances, the context, the scenario a little bit deeper, and don't take too much for granted. It doesn't mean you go and all you do is full contact fight, because a lot of the guys that do that, they don't have the structure and the strategy and the tool set to be able to handle themselves in a lot of situations. They just get tough. And that's okay. You need to be tough. But if you actually want to handle yourself technically as a martial artist, well, you got to do both. And these kind of strategies just, they lack in realism, I'm sorry to say. If you've enjoyed this, look, this is the first one of these that I've done. I'm thinking of doing a few more. I've got some other ones in mind. I think it's really important. And again, not in this game to troll or to knock on Jake. I do like him a lot as a guy, and I think that he's got a lot of other videos where he's doing good work. It's just that when we're talking about self-defense, nobody, even me, if I'm doing something wrong or saying something wrong, I should be called out as well. This is important. This stuff is, related to your survival, to your life. I mean, you got to be learning the right stuff, and people should be responsible for what they're putting out. So that's important. But if you like this kind of stuff, this kind of analyses, martial arts, self-defense, whatever, let me know. Let me know what direction might kind of entertain you or interest you a little bit, and I'd be happy to kind of look at some other options. Yeah, like, subscribe, be weightless. See you in the next video.
If they're strong enough, they can take the next shot. So we want to shake his brain.
Hurt the neck, shake the brain.